Welcome back to another episode of Bars Loaded Podcast. Ben is sick today. So today you're listening to a podcast that I did solo with James Thayer. James is the Associate Director of Fitness and Health Promotion at Washburn University in Kansas, a prescript educator and RX co-host with James McIntosh, a previous guest and friend of the show, and owner of Byproduct Performance. James and I spoke about bridging the gap between education and experience in regards to the fitness space and athletic performance. We spoke about the challenges of developing a coach's eye and what that means, and the work that he's doing with the students that he works with to help develop this. This is a super interesting conversation. I really enjoyed talking to James. If you don't follow James on Instagram, I definitely suggest you do. You can find him at Thayer2513. That's Thayer 2513. And I'm going to do my best to put that in the show notes of this podcast. I'm not actually sure how to do that just yet, but I'm doing my very best to figure that out before this episode is released. So if I haven't got to there yet, just look it up, Thayer2513, and if I did figure it out and became a tech genius between now and then, you'll be able to find that handle in the show notes. Without further ado, hope you enjoy this episode. And welcome back to Bars Loaded Podcast with Ben and
Nick. But yeah, just waiting, 10, 20, sometimes 30 minutes to talk to the person afterwards. And sometimes it was just a handshake of like, hey, I've really appreciated your presentation. It gave me some insight, and, that might be the interaction, or it might be somebody that wants to engage, and, we spend another half hour to an hour talking just from that interaction. But it's great to be able to use this platform to facilitate some of those conversations and get insight into individuals doing great things in great spaces.
Yeah, it's been honestly the wildest journey. Like it's been something, and I'm an avid podcast listener. Yours and Max is one of my favorites. The other RX one, there's a bunch that I listen to, but anytime I'm in the car, a lot of the time when I'm training as well, I'm just kind of listening to podcasts. I find it an easy thing to do. And to be the one actually hosting these conversations and facilitating these conversations is such a wild feeling. And then the contacts that we've been able to make already in such a short amount of time, it's been insane. Like, this podcast has already led to me getting a strength and conditioning role with a local club that I'm doing this year, which is literally a dream come true. I mean, I've been in this industry PTing now for a very long time, since I was 17, and I'm 38 this year, so 21 years. And the goal when I started was to be a strength and conditioning coach for a rugby league team. There's been twists and turns along the way, and that never actually eventuated until this year. But that's a direct result of this podcast, which is incredible.
Well, and as we were talking about earlier before you hit the record button, it was not waiting for the right time or the perfect moment that I think that's time and time again that you'll hear with a lot of coaches or trainers that have perspective and have experiences. They learn so much from the mistakes that they made along the way, and then that they can take those mistakes and expedite the process for the next people that they interact with or that they train. But it's from those experiences of not doing it right that they were able to better their systems and really develop to these people that we want to talk to on the podcast. So just kind of recognizing that you taking the step to do the podcast and not waiting till it felt perfect or like you were super polished. It's like sometimes you just have to dive in and figure it out along the way.
Yeah, man. And if you go back and listen to the early episodes, like we've literally made every mistake that you could possibly make along the way already. And we're what I think this episode's like 35 or something like that. So um, we've made every mistake. Like for the longest time, I had my microphone facing the wrong way. So,
Just like,
so
why is
like
this audio sound like I'm shouting across the room?
yeah, it sounded so echoey because literally like the way that this mic is set up is it only picks up sound from half of the microphone, not through the top. So it's like a wedge this way. So I had it facing the other way because the logo's facing me. And I was like, well, surely, like, I want the logo facing out, not facing me. That would make sense. You don't get a tattoo like on the inside of your skin. You want it facing out. So I was like, I had it the other way. And so my voice was going straight off the wall that's behind my computer back into the microphone. It
Awesome.
just sounded horrible for so long.
Well, if it makes you feel better, any of the technology now is a result of Mac and Marshall helping me get to this because I am not a technology aficionado. So there's been a lot of mistakes on my side as well.
Yeah, but like that just goes to the point of like I would never have known that in 5 years' time. If I waited another 5 years to start doing this, I still would have made that mistake. The only way I figured out that that was a mistake is by doing it. And like, sure, I could have jumped on Google and typed in what way to face my Blue Yeti microphone, but I'm not that smart. Like I
You
need
plug it in
to.
and it's supposed to record things. Like that's how
Yeah, this is a
microphones work.
exactly. Like I just expect things to fall into line. So I make the mistakes and I figure it out as I go. But for everyone listening, you will probably have noticed by now that it's only my voice and our guest James Thayer. Ben's away today, which is really scary because James, I don't know if you've listened to the podcast at all, or if you've seen any of the clips that we put up, or if you've followed my Instagram at whatsoever. But having me alone on the podcast, it's literally like giving the keys to a terrorist and just telling them to have fun. Like this is going to be a wild ride. I'm not sure if you're ready.
I'll strap in. You got to remember, I do a weekly podcast with James McIntosh. So
Well, yeah,
he's prepared me.
this is
We've
probably
navigated some treacherous waters together.
yeah, this is probably going to be very similar. Our dynamic is very much along the lines of McIntyre. Uh, Ben is the voice of reason that keeps me in line and keeps things on track. Without that, sometimes it can go very haywire.
Well, I'm okay with going off the rails. Ben, I'll do my best to impersonate you today, but no promises.
No promises. Perfect. So, mate, I'm going to record an official intro prior to this and just tack it onto the front of it because I always think that that's the best way. And we're already 6 minutes in, and people just kind of want to know what's going on. They don't really want the formal stuff. And I'm terrible at it. I'm much better at doing those intros when the person that I'm introing isn't staring into my eyes. I
Yeah,
find it
it's
way
just,
more comfortable.
I mean, if it helps, I'm terrible at taking compliments. So, not that you'd be providing any of those in the intro,
Oh,
but
they will be. Yeah,
it's
for
better
sure.
for me too.
All right, man. So I always kind of just like to start at the start. So if you don't mind, if you could just kind of just tell us a little bit about James. How did you find the gym? How did you start training? And what did that process look like at the start? And then when did you realize that this was something that you enjoyed, and how has that kind of manifested into where you are now?
Yeah, so I'll kind of try to touch on all those points, and then I'll speed through it. If you want to pick up on anything, more than happy to. Um, so yeah, I started. First time I started lifting was whenever I was 12, and so what's it been, 21 years now that I've been in a gym. Started lifting for sports. In high school, junior high, kind of my main sports were football, wrestling, track. And Luckily we had a great weights program from junior high and high school that it was part of a summer program. There were classes, like you could take it as an actual class that was associated with it. Um, so I had some good coaches that allowed for that exposure, but it was always something that you do this to get better at the sport. And
Hmm.
so it was kind of always this medium that no matter the season, it was a constant through life. So went through junior high, high school, kind of playing those sports, staying active and involved in the weight room. Then I played it JUCO, so that's the like community college lower level football. Weights still an aspect of it. Whenever I transitioned out of athletics, did some minor things here and there, still trying to performance based, stay involved with grappling, jujitsu, MMA, but eventually it got to that time of like, okay, I'm in college, like let's focus on the thing and like start doing career path and finding jobs and all that. So what I recognized whenever the sport was gone, that the weight room was still there, and that had been a constant over my life. The weight room was never, it's never something that I hated. I enjoyed going to it, but it was never something I really focused on because it was always just a key or a component to the sport. Like you do this to get stronger, faster, and that is the sport, which was the primary focus of my life at that time. And so, in transitioning from like an athlete to just a person out in the world now, luckily enough, I was able to recognize that the gym had been my constant. And around that time, I was going to school for political science. Also, around that time, I was before graduating. I recognized I don't want to be a lawyer. There were some limitations in what I wanted to do with it, and a lot of aspects of it is paperwork and boring. So I was like, okay, I need to do something else. I'm not going to law school now, and this is later half of junior year whenever I'm almost done with the degree. So then I started looking around, and it's like, well, the gym's been that constant. Let me go into human health performance. And around that time, that's whenever I started working at the University Rec Center as a head lifeguard. That evolved into a personal trainer, group fitness, and that paired very well with the degree path that I was taking, that it was very hands on in the university's approach. So we got a lot of opportunities and experiences going out, doing like lunch and learns, doing different like fairs, and even like having a client that we train through the class, getting experiences through different group fitness formats. It's very hands on and interactive, which made that direct association of what we're learning and how we can actually apply this and what are career fields that we can go into. Started connecting those pieces. From there, I kind of stayed the route in campus recreation as a personal trainer. That evolved. Once I got my degree, I became a graduate assistant for the campus rec under fitness and wellness. So now I was training trainers, training group fitness instructors, overseeing fitness and wellness programs. My career path evolved into kind of continuing through that into the professional side of it, where now I was overseeing students and helping them develop their career paths in fitness and wellness, and helping them develop and kind of connect the dots between the classroom and the actual hands-on experience that we could offer through the rec center. And that's how I found myself where I am today.
That's quite a journey. So there's a couple of things that I want to touch on there, actually, and we'll kind of weave in and out of them and see if we can kind of make some sense of this. I'll do my very best. But you mentioned university, going through that formal education, and that being a big part of kind of how you've ended up where you are now. And you're still at the university, correct?
Yeah, so I'm at a different university now where I did my undergrad and grad school. was Emporia State University. That's a D2. And then whenever I transitioned over to my professional career, I first started at Texas A&M Commerce in Texas, but as an assistant director overseeing fitness and wellness. And now the last 5 years, I've been at Washburn University as an associate director of fitness and health promotion.
Nice. And Washburn is in
Topeka, Kansas.
oh, shout out Kansas.
Yeah,
Patrick Mahomes.
home state.
I mean, oh, is that your home state?
Yep.
Dude, I'm a Seahawks fan just because when I lived over in the States, a big part of the time that I lived there was in Seattle when Seattle was winning with the Legion of Boom. And it was like, if you lived in Seattle during that time and you weren't a Seattle fan, there's something wrong with you. It was, you had to be a 12. And plus I really liked their colors. Like, that's how I picked my team when I got there. I was like, lime green and navy for sure. Like, that's my team. But yeah, Patrick Mahomes and that Patrick Mahomes Travis Kelce connection in the recent years has been super nice to watch.
Yeah, they've made an incredible team, and I know I'm NFL wise, I don't follow it as much, but Kansas, Missouri are very, very happy with the evolution of the Chiefs over the last several years because there were some hard decades.
There was a lot of hard decades, yeah, very much so. Like when I was there, they were horrible. But yeah, so talking about university and formal education, so a little bit of a background. I'm currently studying at university as well, a degree in exercise and sports science with the goal of doing a master's of physiotherapy afterwards, just so that I can do S&C and physiotherapy and kind of oversee the whole program from injury prevention, management, all the way through to return to play and performance. I'm noticing a huge disparity between theory and practical when we're learning about this stuff. So as someone that I know knows what they're talking about and knows how to train people in real life and understands that action and function are different things and there's different ways to apply these things, how has that been something that you navigate, and is that something that you try and I guess instill in the students that you oversee?
Yeah, so I think it's helpful to keep in mind in university there's a saying that like the classroom's always 10 years behind of what practically is being done in the field. Like it's always behind field work because they're going off of books and trying to teach from that. But on that same side, why it's so important to teach from that theory perspective is because most of the time, like would be a unique case that most students don't have experience. And so trying to teach the theoretical, but also not having that experience behind it to really see how it can apply and when it applies best and when it doesn't, that it can be difficult to navigate. So for you, it's probably a great time because you're able to translate that information more directly than probably other peers that you have. But as far as like how I try to navigate that with students is I try to be mindful of what they're learning in the classroom. I no longer teach in the kinesiology department. Now I'm just strictly with the program and service side of it. So I have a lot more control on how we implement things and what we do and the training and development on the student side. So I try to be mindful of what they're learning in the classroom, being able to know the experiences that they're having there and experiences they're not getting and try to facilitate those in our space to help with that development. But it's also recognizing that in my position that I need to help connect those dots, that sometimes even if we're showing, it doesn't always mean that that connection because it's the first time experience or there's limited experience. A lot of my fitness staff is athletes, so they have that athletic background that we can relate to. But as far as being able to train somebody for general population, like a track athlete might only know explosive things and moving through quarter ranges of motion because that's how they've been taught. So it's we're looking at, hey, how can we translate the things that you understand and be able to apply some of these principles and understanding and take the information that you're getting from the classroom and bring this all into a complete package to help them develop, but also being able to like provide the support of this is going to be your hands-on experience. Like I'm here to help structure it, to help relay it, but also like this is your time to navigate it a little bit and figure out how we can talk to people, what language we're going to use, how we modify and adjust exercise based on the people that are coming in, and getting them experience with a wide variety of population that we have, from faculty and staff to students to different limitations, that it's not just all clean bill of health people coming in. It's, hey, here's a wide variety of general population, and this is how we're going to understand to train them, and we can use some of your individual experience, whether it be sport, whether it be what your interest is, whether it be what your training style is, but be able to translate that to the individual so it's not just cookie cutter, and you can really take this information and directly apply it to make a program for that one person.
Yeah, I love that, and it really speaks to the value of both. I mean, what I'm finding is in the formal education kind of side of things is there's a lot of academics that haven't necessarily been outside of that environment and done these things in the real world. And it's great to be able to provide a base level of knowledge, and it's super important because some of the stuff that I'm learning is like, okay, this is really super applicable, and this is a great base level of knowledge that then I can apply in these certain situations or expand out from in other situations. And some of it is just I'm finding completely useless, and it's being able to discern between when we need to look at academia and when we need to look at experience and draw upon the right tool for the right job. Um, Something that comes to mind instantly when I say that is I remember hearing you say fairly recently that you were doing some kind of testing within the gym environment, and I think you had a few students with you, and you guys were kind of looking for issues in movement patterns or discrepancies in movement patterns, and you were able to figure out or identify. I think it was a lack of internal rotation or something like that via just like how hard the foot was hitting on the lateral lunge. I think it was something like that, and you were just listening to like the rhythm of the foot hitting, and one was hitting harder and one was thumping harder, and it was a little bit of a different rhythm. How have you found that experience has been able to really translate into your coaching?
Yeah, so I think experience is it's pivotal to be able to stay up to date and not fall into the trap of just teaching the same thing over and over for decades, because I would agree with you that academia can get pretty complacent in the fact of they don't have to step outside of the space. There are situations where somebody's teaching the same class for 5-10 years, and they haven't changed the textbook, they haven't updated the PowerPoints, they haven't really pursued innovation because they haven't had to. And again, that's not to speak to the university as a whole. There are some great professors out there, but to that point, I think it's very important to get experience outside of the space so we don't fall into that complacency, or don't fall into like an echo chamber. That's one of the big reasons that I initially kind of went the route of Prescript to learn from them, because I knew that it was important for my education to continue to pursue information outside of the space that I could get it. I needed to hear other voices. I needed to be very, very intentional with not falling into an echo chamber, because it can be easy, especially in my space where, you know, I'm considered the expert in my area. So that's one aspect of experience, is making sure that you're getting it and making sure that it's something outside of your space, whether that's conferences, podcasts, presentations, courses, whatever, but just stepping outside of it to get a different perspective. And what you've also noticed, I'm sure, or with you kind of saying, you found some helpful, some not, that you've noticed in that perspective. You have the experience to be able to um, differentiate between the two of this is actually useful and this isn't. I was going to ask off of that because I think there's one more question that I haven't quite got to that you asked at the end there, but I did want to ask you off of that. Does anything stand out what you've covered so far, since you're currently doing coursework, that like you were like, oh, this is actually very, very helpful and something that you've been able to take in, and something that you were like, I'm not going to use this at all?
Oh, yeah, there's a few. I mean, I don't. Yeah, there's been a few. To be honest, like a lot of the stuff that I've been doing so far is revision. Um, Not so much revision because I haven't done it before, but it's like revision of knowledge because it's just stuff that I've picked up through the year doing various courses. I mean, a lot of the stuff that I'm doing at the moment has already been covered through the prescript level one, and beyond that has kind of been communicated to me how this is applicable and how it can not be applicable, which I think the the coursework that I'm doing at the moment formally is falls short a little bit on, where it's like they just kind of say this is the thing,
Mm.
but then it doesn't so much go into how it can be applied, when it can be useful, when it can't be useful, or when it shouldn't be used. And I think that that's a really big kind of tick in the box of prescript is they do teach you this really solid base of knowledge, and then how to then go and apply it. So you're not just, or how to apply it within a framework and how to model that. Some of the stuff that I have found really interesting though was the dissections. I super enjoyed that just because it's not very often you get to see underneath the skin, and how things move. So I was definitely the weird guy in the back of the classroom, like grabbing the knee and like moving it all around and cutting things and seeing how that affected the stability of the joint.
Yeah,
But I found that useful.
yeah, that'd be very, very useful, I'd imagine, and interesting. And, that's, I think having that, again, you having prior experience to know, okay, like, I can really put this aside. Like, yeah, I need to study it to be able to pass the test, but
Mhm.
because you have that experience, like, this is where I can put focus on, or this is where I can put value in something and really take this and apply it back, because you have more of a dedicated pathway how that information can be applied. Where, you know, a lot of times I'm working with 18 to 21, 22-year olds that haven't laid out that pathway, or might not even know what they want to do with the information yet. And so it's all abstract to them. It is all theory. But to bring it back to that final point that you were asking, of how that experience, how to like utilize that experience for the students that I'm overseeing and trying to develop, is putting them in situations where we can see, or yeah, we can see things, we can hear things, we can actually try things, we can get very hands on, and in the moment can adjust things, get them to recognize aspects to it. We try to develop a coach's eye. So, as you were mentioning before, one of the things we do in our training program is we do a movement screen. Um, and this, it's not a branded one, like some of them are out there. It's a bit, a bit more just, yeah, movement focused. And what I try to instill in the trainers is like, this is the opportunity that we're trying to develop a coach's eye. Like, I don't need you to know what the problem is, but I need you to see that there is a problem. And so how we've stacked it or laid it out, it kind of builds upon some of those issues where it's like, okay, if you notice a hip shift in the hinge, it's going to show up in the squat. So like, yeah, maybe we go and we have them do 1 rep and we check that box, but now let's start searching above and below the chain and see what else is being impacted. And so as they're able to start recognizing this, they can see that interconnectivity of how these compensation patterns can correlate and how they can transcend to the ground to the ground, up the stream, down the stream, but just making that connection, giving them the experience of seeing this in real time, and then being able to layer on top some of those cues that you were mentioning of like, okay, if like we have natural lines in one of the spaces that we do assessments in. So if somebody's doing a lateral lunge and, one side they're straight on that line and the other one they're off the line, like there's a reason for that. It didn't just happen. Or if we're noticing difference in how they're stepping, how they're landing, what they have to do to complete the task, starting to get them in the mindset of they're not thinking about it trying to do it perfect like you've been coached or like you think about exercise. They're just trying to complete the task. So they're providing a story in how they choose to complete that task. That we don't have to, if you have somebody do a squat and they automatically put their arms out, like that's something we need to make note of, that they've recognized by creating this counterbalance that they're able to set back into a squat. That's something that we can recognize, but something that we can also utilize in training because they've developed this system. Or if it's a compensation that we don't want, that, okay, we need to start looking at how we can address this, how we can cue it, or how we can put them in positions to provide different options than what they're currently using.
Yeah, off the back of that, I just that kind of prompted a answer to the question that you asked me before about what are some of the things that I've found completely useless or that I wouldn't implement at all. The endless amounts of screening tests that we've been shown. It's like no word of a lie. I mean, you're probably well aware. I went through an entire week of 5 lectures, so 5 hours worth of these are 5 hours worth of screening tests that you need to run with your clients. Can they move their neck in this direction? Do they have access to these ranges at the shoulder? Do they have access to this at the scapula? Does their spine move in this way? Do their hips literally a test for every single thing? And then it was like, these are the tests that you need to run for your clients to make sure that they move properly before you write a program. And I'm just thinking, like, one, I train 99% of my clients are powerlifters at a decent level. The one client that I have that's not a powerlifter is a professional rugby league player. None of those clients are running through hours worth of tests before they get their program. That's just not going to happen. So it's more so understanding what these imbalances or what these compensations look like in movement patterns, and then picking them up quickly and then making decisions on how we're going to move forward with that information.
Yeah,
Instead of
absolutely.
spending hours and hours and hours running redundant testing.
Did they have you get out the goeometer and start measuring their degrees and everything?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean you're gonna find that, and again, there can, especially in a rehabilitation setting, that there can be um, benefits to that if you're trying to increase it. And it's show your work. We need to see that, hey, since this surgery or this injury, they've been able to increase it. But you understand as a performance coach that, hey, performance is the proxy. This is what we're looking to do. But the same approach can be looked at with just humans, GPP clients, that they're performing at life. Like the compensation patterns that they utilize are the strategies that they use in their everyday. So and this is another thing to trainers, if we can start relaying this information of how this connects, like not only you seeing the dot, but can we connect these dots for our clients? So then they're starting to connect them outside of the gym. One of like one of my favorite ones is anytime, because I'll do fitness consultations too, but anytime somebody comes in with low back pain, one of the first things I check for is how they set down in the chair. Is that set down kind of like through a flex spine where they're just kind of flopping down? And are they getting up through momentum and through a flex spine? It's like, okay, I have one thing that I can give you it's like the little ticks that if you point it out to somebody, they can't unsee it. That's
Mm-hmm.
one little thing, like putting them in appropriate positions, just giving them a couple cues. And at the end of the day, if the frequency at which they're doing or assuming that posture, that position, that impact that is, contributing to the pain and that experience, if we can lessen that, even if it's a couple times in the day, we can build upon that each time we recognize it. And it adds up eventually of work done outside of the gym and in the gym that we can reinforce it. And but take being able to connect those dots and help trainers see those dots so then they can help their clients see those dots as well and translate that information, because by and large, people looking for a trainer or coming to them, the gym might not be their most favorite experience. They've recognized a benefit to it. And so if we can create that association, this is going to help with the thing that you actually want to do, and you can incorporate this outside of the gym and it doesn't take that much. It's a net positive for everyone.
Yep. Yeah. Outside of competitive powerlifters and maybe CrossFitters and bodybuilders, most other general population or even other athletes, it's like the gym is just a necessary evil a lot of the time. It's not
Yeah,
necessarily
absolutely.
the thing that
Yeah.
they love doing.
Yeah, and it's important to recognize that not everyone's going to be like us that are trying to make a career out of living in a gym.
Imagine. So, all right. So, take me back to 12-year-old James entering the gym. Shout out for starting at 12. I actually started training at 12 as well, and I don't know many other people that started at 12. That's a young age to start, but it does give you a good head start in the athletics kind of realm as well, which is why I started, was because I was 6 foot, over 6 foot at 12 years old, and they
Shit.
would all, yeah, they would always put me in the age groups up to play footy because I was huge. And I quickly realized that although I'm as big as the 16-year-olds, when I'm 12 years old, there's a huge strength discrepancy between a 12-year-old and a 16-year-old, regardless of size. So I was like, I need to get in the gym here. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep getting pummeled every week. But when I started, I said I was training for football, but my understanding of strength and conditioning for performance and the people that were around me not having an understanding of what strength and conditioning for performance looked like led my training to predominantly just be like bodybuilding training and then going and playing the sport. So when you started at 12 years old, you wanted to get better at the sports that you were playing. What did your training look like?
Yeah, so again, luckily I was kind of in my town. We had that as an option to start summer weights program, and it was encouraged going from sixth grade into seventh grade over that summer period to get in there so you could start learning the technique. So mainly seventh and eighth grade, around that time, it was a lot of like learning the technique in preparation for what the high school weight room looked like, that was led by the fitness coach, or sorry, the football coach. Um, so a lot of it was technique driven. It was position. It was just trying to get a bunch of 11, 12, 13 year olds to like follow direction, stay on cue. Luckily, my family was very, very involved in athletics in my hometown. So my dad and his siblings, they all were athletes in that hometown. My grandpa was the head football coach for a while. What was it? It was from 1994 to 2013 we had between my brother and sister and my 5 cousins, one of us was in high school for that duration for almost 2 decades.
Not at
Yeah.
the same school.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, it was very sports were a big thing for family, so it was kind of an easy transition into the weight room. And my aunt, who was also my track coach through high school, she was the junior high weight coach, so I already knew the coach going in. I'd already like had some interest in exercising, just roughhousing, just trying to see like what my body could do, whether it was like the presidential test where you had to do like the pull-ups or hangs or run a mile, any of that. Like there was always that competitive nature, and then that got facilitated through sports. So starting out early, it was a lot of just learning what exercise was instead of like just moving your body in these different capacities.
Nice. And then bring it forward to now. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you're actually doing some S&C work for a gymnastics program. Is that correct?
I've done the programming for the dance team and cheerleading squad at Washburn. So yeah, some that's one of the aspects, not necessarily like in the job description of my role as an associate director. It was more so neither of these programs had ever had an S&C program associated to them, but
Hmm.
they're competitors at our school. And so one of my philosophies, if you think you can do it better than what's being done, like it's your responsibility to step up and offer it. Otherwise, like shut your mouth and like stay out of it.
Yes.
So it's one of those where like, hey, if nobody's going to offer this, I will. So it was something I took on. And yeah, definitely a eye-opening experience, and has been a very, very good experience being able to work with those teams. Recently, our dance team competed at nationals and won. They have like 3 different performances of genres: palm, hip hop, and jazz, and won second, third, and fourth nationally. Second being the highest that they've placed in the history of the program.
Nice. Yeah, that's awesome. Um, g- Gymnastics are a fascinating sport. Like the
Yes, yes, they
strength
are.
that they possess, I think pound for pound could be up there with anyone. To be honest, some of the stuff that they do is super impressive. What have you found? Have you kind of found that transferred over into the weight room with those athletes, or is it just completely different?
So there's some similarities and some differences. What I would say is anybody on either of the teams, on dance, on cheer, that has a gymnastics background, they're very, very athletic. The things that they can do with their bodies in those performances in those sports is unreal. Um, but also I found a varying degree of, some maybe had some experience from high school in the weight room, and some hadn't at all, even if they had a gymnastics background. So part of that was, recognizing what the demands of the sports were, what the exposure to positions that they were getting, what was the common injuries, and then looking at how we can create a program that offers some differences that they're not getting through their sport, but also being able to identify the varying degrees of experiences that they actually have in the weight room. So how can I instill a program, or a program that's adaptable to each one of these athletes, and try to have a good enough base to be like very, very encompassing, since we had limited days that we worked together, but also adaptable enough that it can meet the individual needs of each one of them, each athlete. So yeah, the like any of them that had a gymnastic background was very, very athletic, but it was interesting working with those teams. One, because the lack of weight room experience. So that was a whole learning opportunity, but then also um, trying to create positions and options which they either didn't have access to or they didn't utilize quite a bit. So an easy example that I'd give that I found quite a bit was in gymnastics, cheer, dance. A lot of times there's this overextension whenever they finish or whenever they stick a landing that's kind of just repetitively put in. And so, even if the hands are up overhead, that they're getting compression in the posterior chain, they're getting extension in the lumbar spine, but and a lot of times center of mass moving forward from the rib cage, not keeping that stacked position. So that was one thing, is teaching stacked positions because they weren't used to it, because that's not how they were taught, because both of those sports are performance based in viewing and being judged. Like, it's not just being able to do flips, turns, back handsprings. You're literally performing in front of people, and so that visualization was a component in how to finish or how to cue. So getting, or even like a back handspring, like using that position of like a big extension to create that leverage. So offering positions um, that kind of countered what they were already doing. I didn't need to double down on what they were doing in their performance based movements, because they were already good at that. What I needed to give them was options outside of what they already had. So, it started simple, like, hey, let's get positions where we can actually stack our ribs over our pelvis. Let's use our core bracing, not just in like a hollow hold position. So whenever we look at bracing, whenever we do ab positions, we're not going to do these hollow holds, because you're already doing it in the sport. You're already doing it in those practices, or creating those disassociations of, let's get our arms over our head without our sternum having to lift up. Can it stay neutral? And so we started basic, and once we got those understandings, then we could really utilize the potential that they had from being strong, from being explosive, from having these like a wide array of movements that they could do. It's just creating a like controlled atmosphere or environment that they could now exhibit these newfound positions.
Yeah, I mean that's something that we find a lot in powerlifting specifically, and to tie this all back together really nicely is you mentioned during that little soliloquy that if you feel like there's a better way to do it, it's kind of your responsibility to speak up and do it, or just shut up. Basically, is you asked before I started recording, why did we start this podcast, or why did I want to start this podcast? And the shorter answer is exactly that. Is we noticed working with powerlifters that powerlifters do a lot of squatting, benching, and deadlifting, and then outside of squatting and benching and deadlifting, they do a lot of other movements that are basically exactly the same as squatting, benching, and deadlifting. Just they just use different implements, but it's the exact same movement patterns. And then they end up, doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on these patterns that they're already doing more than enough of, leading to injuries, leading to time out of the gym, leading to less progress. And so a lot of the discussions that we were having privately was like, there's better ways to do this. We're showing that there's better ways to do this with our clients that are not doing as much of this stuff year round, where there's periods of very specific work in a competition prep, for example. And then outside of that, there's periods of more general athletic qualities being trained and exposure to different positions. And what's happening is they're getting less injuries, they're spending more time in the gym, and ultimately they're making more progress over a period of time. So we kind of felt like it was our responsibility to put that into the world, and have a say, so that we weren't just talking shit behind people's back, basically.
Yeah. It's well, and props to both of you for having that mindset and taking action to it, because it's it still baffles me that, like, frontal plane and transverse plane movements to power lifters is still today like how like I don't even need you to like step in a lateral lunge. I just need you to sway a little bit side to side. Let's get a little bit of movement through these planes. But yeah, it's still, something very, very prominent of that double or triple down on in the sagittal plane and on those movements. There's absolutely a time and place for it. But as you've spoken to, like ultimately, if you can stay healthier longer, you can keep doing the sport longer and you're going to see improvement over the long haul.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I have a reel coming out. It'll come out before this podcast comes out, but basically it's just me speaking about my experience of the when I was the strongest I've ever been at the top end within powerlifting is the most frail I've ever felt physically, because if I did anything that wasn't squatting, benching, and deadlifting, I felt like I was going to pop something. And I was going to tear a groin if I stepped sideways or blow my back out if I twisted in my chair. But I was really strong at squatting and deadlifting.
Yeah,
But it's like,
you're lucky you're tall, because like reaching to top shelves, that was probably nope, that's not happening today. I have to reach
yeah,
across to do something. No.
no thanks. It was bending down to pick something up off the ground.
Oh, tying your shoes. Yep.
Dude, oh,
Like we're
my
gonna
wife would
prop
put my
this.
shoes on.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not even kidding.
Uh,
Yeah, she didn't want to tie them, so I would leave them untied, but she would have to put them on. But yeah, I was really strong, so you don't have to do it that way though, which is why we started the podcast. So, all right, James, let's take it out of fitness for a minute. Tell me some of the things, if anything, external to training that really drive you.
let's see. I think since it's in the setting that I am, the like development of an individual, and whether that is through a fitness path, whether that's through a career path, but like helping somebody see their potential and helping them realize a path forward. I think that's something that's kept me working with students in a university setting, because it is such a pivotal time in people's in their life, and so helping to be a part of that, helping to be a resource just in general. That's something that has stuck with me and kind of kept me in the field.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I love that, man. That's man, I wish I had that when I was starting out, that's for sure. Someone with your level of experience and knowledge to back it up that could help guide some decisions. Definitely would have fast tracked my career. That's definitely for sure.
Well, and me as well, which don't let me forget, because I know you guys do like ask the next guest questions, because my question will be based around that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Where I'm getting to that. So I've got one more before I get to that. So the one before that, the penultimate question, I guess you could say, if you're a Formula One fan, is if you could have dinner with one person, dead or alive, who would it be
So
and
see,
why?
I'll give you three quick ones. I know that's kind of
Yeah.
cheating, but
Ah, go for it.
whatever. I'm
Three's great.
taking it.
Do it.
Um,
This is your podcast,
so
man.
so yeah, one would be an obvious one would be my dad. He passed in 2023, so just getting that time and that experience, another conversation and discussion with him. Outside of that, of two other people would be these ones might be a little bit more so on like poli sci roots, but one would be Socrates. So he
Mm-hmm.
was a Greek philosopher. He's one of my favorite Greek philosophers for two reasons. One is because he really brought about, or I guess three reasons. One was the concept or the question of like know thyself came
Mm-hmm.
from him, of really creating, like he was the epitome of a field of like asking questions of thinking deeper, of like looking within yourself to like start defining some of these things and understanding some of these things. I liked the way that, I don't know if you know much about him, but he never wrote anything down. Everything that we know about Socrates is from his students.
I didn't know that. I
Yeah,
know a
so
little bit.
so
I didn't
he
know
he
that.
actually didn't write anything down. His students are the ones that kind of carried his name forward and wrote about him, and so that's how we have information around him.
Hmm.
But I liked his debate style, or like his philosophy style. He never really answered questions whenever he got in debates. He just poked holes in the other person's logic. And so that's kind of where the debate style of prompting issues and the person having to go back and try to defend their point
Hmm.
while it pulls them off of it. Essentially, he was just an asshole, which makes me laugh.
Yeah, that's
Um,
awesome.
and then the last thing about him is um, he was sentenced to death based on basically corrupting the youth and making fun of the gods. And so like they weren't, usually they weren't crimes at that time where they prosecuted people, or and definitely not to like somebody with that name and prominence. But he like a lot of he hadn't made any allies with him as a person, and so part of it was political. But whenever it came time, he got his sentence was death by hemlock, which is a poison. And there's kind of a famous painting of him getting ready to drink the hemlock, and all of his students around, and people trying to encourage him to. They had a way where he basically could sub route the death sentence by being kind of going off to an island and living out his life there, but he could never like be Socrates of Greece again. He couldn't live there. Um, why am I losing the word? Similar to Napoleon, what happened?
Is it exiled?
Yes, exile. Thank you very much.
Yep.
So he could have lived in exile for years, but instead he chose to go to see his sentence out because it was a matter of principle, and he wouldn't go against his word because that was what was important to him. So I think he'd be an interesting person to discuss or to have dinner with and kind of hear those philosophies and those thoughts. The last person would be George Orwell, who wrote Animal Farm in 1984. So, Animal Farm's one of my favorite books.
Hmm.
He's kind of a political writer that wrote about propaganda, wrote about being mindful of the control of government. So, he'd be somebody not only because I enjoy his writing style and those two books specifically that he put out, but it'd also be interesting to see his take on the world today and some of the things that we're seeing and experiencing, what his thoughts would be on that, with the direct access to the individual that there is now, and if there'd be a little bit of worry and fear from some of his predictions from 1984.
I think there'd probably be a little bit more than a little bit.
I'd agree. But yeah,
I'd say
those
so.
I think those would be three people I'd want to have dinner with.
Dude, that would be an interesting roundtable.
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah,
I just
yes.
sit back, and enjoy my meal, just listen to the conversation. It's kind of one of
Yeah,
those tables.
yeah, you could kind of just kick it off and then you wouldn't really have to do much talking after that, I don't think. Socrates was a great one. I would love that too. That's not something that I would ever say as a response to that question, but now that you bring it up, yeah, he's fantastic. Awesome, man. All right, so you mentioned the little segment that we do where the previous guest gets to ask the following guest a question, and then following that, I'll also give you the opportunity to do the same for the following guest. So the question that we got from you from our previous guest is, which coach has had the biggest impact on you and why?
Hmm. Let's see. Probably if I were to go the sports route, probably the most impactful coach I would have had would have been my high school football coach. Um, I'll go with my linebacker coach, because I think, like, whenever I think back on this question of all the coaches I've had, all the experiences I've had, some very unique situations with coaches that are probably, I'll save that for maybe another podcast. But as far as impact, I think to one coach in particular um, that just gave me a chance and allowed me to play in as a freshman very, very early on, where maybe I didn't have the confidence because I was young for my class. So what, at that time I was probably 15 playing with 18-year-olds, maybe even 14, depending on the timeline. But playing with um, these athletes that I went head to head with every single day and was on the scout team and just getting the shit beat out of me. And when the time came, though, he called upon me, hey, we need you to come in. We need you to step up and take on this role. And so it was somebody um, that showed confidence in me, even if I didn't have it in myself. But because they believed in me, because they gave me that responsibility, that I didn't want to let them down. And so that, instilled something that maybe I hadn't quite had to that level yet. That experience of like, okay, even if I don't think I can do it, this person does. And so I'm going to step up for them. So it's that chance, and something you find in team sports too, of, okay, let's do this for the team. Let's think outside of ourselves. Let's be able to put these injuries, this lack of confidence, any of these things aside, and really do it out for the other people. So I'd say that's probably that be one of the most impactful coaches that I've had, and maybe one of the more impactful moments that, thinking on it, sticks with me.
Yeah, it's crazy to think how those moments can really shape a young person or a young athlete's rest of their life, really, and the outlook that they take into everything. I have a similar experience, and I know Ben has a similar experience. It's something that we speak about on the podcast a lot. Is that that's such a big positive for team sports and the team environment, and having good leaders within that environment is, whether you believe in yourself or not, it's kind of irrelevant in those times, because you know that the coach believes in you or you wouldn't be there. You know your teammates believe in you and depend on you, otherwise you wouldn't be there. So it's like it almost becomes this thing that's bigger than yourself. And we don't see that so often in individual sports, because it's like, okay, it's me, it's my training, it's my food, it's me on the platform, whatever it is. And we can say that we have teams around us that help us spot and load all we want, but it's still an individual sport, and it's not quite the same of having those 10, 12, 13 guys beside you, and the coach that's depending on you, and you just have to do your job, and it's bigger than you. And I
Yeah,
think that's a
absolutely.
life lesson that can be taken and applied to everything.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's can be very influential and probably something more people need.
Definitely something more people need. Um, cool. All right. So I will remind you that you mentioned for me to remind you, this is your opportunity now to ask our next guest a question, and I feel like you have something in mind already, which is great. I feel like you've done your homework, which makes me feel happy that you actually listen to some of these, and there are
Yeah,
people in
yeah,
the world that listen, and I'm not just talking to myself.
yeah. I like to do my homework. I like to not only like get familiar with the host, but also like the cadences and kind of what that flow is, so I can try to assist in like staying up with that of like, okay, do we need to like be faster with it? Like, is it more discussion based? Is it rapid fire? I think it just helps with the podcast. From being somebody that does a podcast, I appreciate it whenever guests can come on and like have some knowledge. So I try to do the same thing.
Thank you, sir.
You guys are doing great, by the way.
Thank you.
So my question, and this kind of relates to something that we were talking about before. You mentioned you were like, I wish somebody was like you was there whenever I was coming up, and similar to myself, whenever I was coming up in the fitness space, I didn't really have that mentor or continual guidance. So a lot of times what I needed to do was I had to step outside. I had to find it myself. I had to, really search out and create my own development. So what my question for the next guest would be, what quality did you need coming up? And do you provide that to others now?
Beautiful. It's a powerful question, man.
Hopefully you get a good conversation out of it.
Yeah, I think the next guest will actually really love that.
Good.
Cool. Well, I appreciate you jumping on, mate. For everyone that's listening, let's do the whole thing around like where can they find you? What's the best way to reach out? Do you want people to reach out, or do you just want them to leave you alone? All of those things.
Welcome to reach out. I always appreciate conversations and discussions. So first off, to you, Nick, Ben, if you listen to this, thanks for having me on. I always enjoy these conversations. It's always nice to just what you get to do with Ben is just sit around and discuss the things that you're passionate about and that you enjoy. So I appreciate you allowing me to be part of that experience. If the invite ever comes back, I'll be back on and happy to do this again anytime.
Yeah, man, we'll definitely have to run it back. Next time we might pick a topic and just like go super nerdy on it or something.
Yeah, I'm always down for it.
Cool.
But yeah, anybody that wants to reach out, the easiest way is through my Instagram, Thayer, my last name, 2513. Those are my football numbers. That's why I don't know if I've ever discussed that before, but yeah, those were my junior high school football number was 25, 13 was my college number. So it just kind of stuck. And yeah, that's probably the easiest way, just reaching out directly through there. I'm probably the most responsive. Outside of that, me and James McIntosh do the Sunday editions of RXD Radio. Shallow, Genta, Killian, and guests are also on that. So I think it's a great resource to be able to listen 3 times a week now. I think it's a great resource of information. I still listen to it. So anybody that's looking for more of that conversation piece, more of that podcast piece, that's another great way. But if anybody's interested, please reach out. I enjoy these discussions, conversations, and just being able to connect with people.
Beautiful. Yep. Everyone, go follow James. I highly suggest that you do it and listen to the RX Radio podcast as well. It's something that I do every single week, and I agree.
Appreciate that.
It's a great resource and a great laugh at times as well. It's a good combination of both. So we'll leave it there, man. And until next time, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.